Hello, my name is Kinlock and I really like musicals and I want to tell you about one that I saw recently. So I hope that's why you're here, because you want to hear about it. If not, go watch Real Housewives. Bye. Okay, so I was talking to a friend kind of recently and talking about what I look for in a show. And I was like, often what I want is something that makes me laugh and makes me cry. If I can do that, I'll probably be pretty happy. And they were like, that seems like a lot to ask from one show, that you're laughing and crying. Like, come on, isn't that ridiculously high standards? And I was like, no, not for me, because I laugh really easily at really stupid stuff. And I also cry really easily at really stupid stuff. So it's not so much an indicator of whether something is funny if I'm laughing, or whether it's sad or moving if I'm crying or my eyes are welling up. It's more an indicator that it's grabbed me and I'm feeling invested and I'm going along for the ride. Because if I'm just there with it the whole way, then I will laugh at some point and I will cry at some point. That's a certainty. The times where I don't react audibly is if I'm just kind of feeling distant from the whole thing. And that's not what I look for. I want to be right there in it and invested. And Groundhog Day achieved that for me. Just right from the beginning to the end. It just grabbed me. I was buckled in. I was right in there with it. And I just went along for the ride. And there was plenty of laughter. There were a few tears. There was a lot of heartfelt emotion. And so for me, it was just a 10 out of 10 experience. I loved it. But does that mean that you would love it? Because we're different people. I get it. So I want to give you a bit of an idea of what to expect if you're thinking about seeing the show. So let's start with the fact that this show has been around since 2016. The film was an original film from the early 90s, and you're probably familiar with it. But it was adapted into this stage production it opened in 2016. And the creative team responsible is Tim Minchin. The Tim Minchin, Australian icon. You probably know him from the comedic and sometimes philosophical and thought-provoking songs that he performs himself. Okay, mostly just funny, but I like to look for meaning in things, I guess. And he worked with Matthew Warchus, who he had previously collaborated with on the musical adaptation of Matilda. And that was a giant success because it was just so beautifully staged and just really inventive and stuff. And they had a good thing going, Matthew Warchus and Tim Minchin. So they're like, let's do that again, but with Groundhog Day. And then who else did they get on board to write the script, or the book as it is known in musical theatre terms? No one knows why. But the book writer was Danny Rubin. The same Danny Rubin who co-wrote the original film. And this is so exciting and unusual because normally adaptations are just done by a third party without a lot of input from the original creator. And so it can be a little bit of a case of like telephone, or like a bad connection, or a photocopy of a photocopy. Sometimes when you adapt things, a certain core part of the message or a core part of the reason that the first thing was successful might get lost along the way because the people adapting it have a different take on things, or they're like, oh, well, this is the part that I like, this is the part that I liked, and blah. But when it's the same person adapting it, you don't lose that. You don't lose the important lines and the important features that worked about the original thing. In fact, I think that this book is even stronger than the original film. It kind of goes deeper into some of the themes and makes some of its points a bit clearer, at least to me. Also, just having the musical element is so fun because, like, Tim Minchin is a very, very clever lyricist. He also knows how to write a tune, but his lyrics are just so witty and laugh out loud funny. The first act of Groundhog Day, the musical, hilarious, genius. The entire theatre was just like in the palm of its hand. I think we were all kind of going along for that ride, and just tears of laughter. It's so funny, much funnier, I think, than the film. And very clever writing. So I want to give a couple of examples of the ways in which the writing touched me and reached me. And I'll use examples from near the beginning of the story so they're not spoilery. But like, okay, so Groundhog Day, what is it? It's a day where a groundhog gets pulled out, and it's kind of 2nd of February, so it's winter in that part of the world. And they're like, if this groundhog looks and sees its shadow, then that means there's going to be more gloom, more winter. If the groundhog looks towards the light, then that's going to mean spring comes early, hope, and all of those things that spring represents. Anyway, I can't remember the exact way in which this line that explains this plot point is written, but the way it's written was so concise. And for the first time of like being aware of this concept of the groundhog looking for its shadow or stuff, I went, oh, I get it. So it's about perspective. Like if you look towards the shadows, then you're going to have a lot more gloom and doom in your future. If you look towards the light, then there's going to be hope, life, abundance. It's all about perspective. It's just about the way you look at things. And so that line kind of just really like hit me and resonated, because I was like, that's something we can all apply to our own lives. Great. It also just sort of immediately sets up what the rest of the show is going to be about, but in a really kind of subtle, interesting way. The other line that I thought was really funny and really like insightful and kind of resonated is where Phil, our main character, who's kind of having a bit of a crisis, going, what is happening? Why am I experiencing the same day over and over again? How do I get out of this? He seeks help, and one of the people he's asking for help says, blah, 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 try this for your depression. And he's like, I'm not depressed. And the response is, oh, so you're delusional. And I thought that was so good, because it's like, yeah. It's a nice way of saying he is depressed, but without like making it super obvious or him saying, I'm depressed, guys. It's just kind of clear to the people around him that he is, but he doesn't realize he is. And yeah, I just thought it was so good. And again, that sort of thing just resonates because it feels so true to what we experience in our lives. Sometimes we think we're fine when we're not. This whole show, to me, is just a big metaphor. It's very allegorical, and it's all just about our rich inner lives and the way that we look at the world and the way that we go about our lives. Because actually waking up on February 2nd over and over and over and over again, that hasn't actually happened to anyone. That isn't something that we can relate to easily. But the idea of it feels true and it resonates. And why is that? And I think just because, sometimes you do a lot. You put in a lot of energy into trying to change something about your life, and then you just end up right back where you started. And you're like, oh, seems to just not matter what I do, I always end up in the same place. So like, literally, it's different, but emotionally, it's the same. And that really is Phil Connor's journey throughout this show, is that he's just trying all these different things that we too can try in our own lives, and just seeing how that affects the outcome at the end of the day. And it's so cool and interesting to watch him try all these different approaches, and I just found it really moving. I mean, he's got this big, rich inner life that we all do, right? Like, I think I have a rich inner life, and you probably do too. I don't know your life, but I definitely do, and this is a show about that, and it's not something that I often see reflected, and I just really felt seen. Yeah, okay. So then that's Act 1, very funny, very lots of experimenty stuff. And then Act 2 kind of has a bit of a different approach, and we just learn about the rich inner lives of all of the other townspeople as well, and we realize everyone's got that stuff going on that they're like struggling with, and I don't know, it's doesn't seem like a very profound lesson or concept, but it's done in such a beautiful way with sort of such subtlety. I think it's subtle. Maybe my view on subtlety is skewed by the fact that I like really big music theatre splashy moments, but I think it's not bashing you over the head with its message. It just kind of presents it and allows you to kind of draw your own conclusions. But for me, I drew a lot of conclusions. So that's my takeaway. I've read a couple of reviews since it opened, and there have been comparisons to Matilda, because Tim Minchin and Matthew Warchus first worked on Matilda, and Matilda was a huge success, and then this is their follow-up to that, so it's going to invite comparisons. And so I'll address that, and because I'll admit, I was watching it, I was also comparing it to Matilda a little bit, because one way in which it is similar is that the way it's staged is so kind of visually striking and inventive, creative. Some of the stage effects in this show are so clever and cool. There's this car chase, which, like, how do you replicate a car chase on stage? It's such a film trope, a car chase. You can't do justice to that on stage, and yet they found a way. And sure, it's a little bit goofy and silly, but it was also probably like dramatic and all the things that car chase should be, I guess. There is some stage magic, is what I'm trying to say. And like, don't you want that when you go see a stage show, to have some kind of like wow moment? But there were so many wow moments that, I mean, it's hard to keep track of them all. Yeah. Okay, so comparing it to Matilda, that's what I was trying to do, right? Yeah. So comparing it to Matilda, my takeaway was like, okay, I think Matilda's great, enjoyed the music and the story and the staging and stuff, but ultimately, it's a kid's story that didn't really speak to me personally. And also, I found like the villain a little bit too villainy, and the tone of that sort of story with Trunchbull seemed a little bit at odds at times with the tone of other parts of the story. I don't know. It was fine, but I'm just like, this is a kid's story, and I'm not a kid. I'm not the audience for this. It's not that it was bad, I just felt like I wasn't the audience for that. Groundhog Day, however, I'm just like, oh, this is speaking to me where I'm at. This is speaking to me on a level that I'm happy to engage with, and the story means something to me, and just like it, I am the audience for it. But judging by the fact that everyone in the theatre seemed so invested in the story, and as soon as it ended was immediately up on their feet giving a standing ovation, I think everyone is the audience for this story. It's so relatable. So yeah, I think it's just a more mature story that has something for everyone in it. Matilda, not so much. So for me, Groundhog Day is a better show, not because the music's better or the staging's better or whatever. It's just speaks to me personally more, so I enjoy it more. But I also think that that would apply to a lot of people who aren't 10-year-old girls. So what else did I want to say? Huh? Is there anything else I should be saying? One thing that really struck me, so I was with a friend, and one thing that she said as soon as it finished was just like, wow, I can't think of anything else I've seen that is that even across all the different elements. But this was like, no, everything was on the same level. The performances were great as well, like just everything. Oh, another thing that occurred to me is that the story doesn't really have a villain. And I like that because life doesn't always have a villain unless that villain is like the inner saboteur or, you know, your mental wellness or something that you're struggling with, like the internal struggle. It's all just about, the internal struggle. And at the beginning of the show, that's when Phil, the main dude, seems to be struggling the most. Like he's just really unhappy whether he's identified that for himself or not, but he's just kind of acting in a way that no one likes him, and sure, he's successful and like people recognize him on the street because he's a celebrity, but the people who actually know him don't like him, and he doesn't even seem to like himself. He doesn't like other people, and like that's kind of sad. But it also means that the only way is up, baby, for you and me now. Because as the show goes on, he just learns so much more about himself, about other people. He just learns more about living. And I found that so inspiring. It's such a feel-good story that he starts down here and then just goes and then at the end it's up here, and it's such a fun progression to watch that story. Like there's no kind of Dick Dastardly is gonna tie me to the train tracks. Like it's way more uplifting than that, because things just keep getting better, as they say on Queer Eye. Yeah, so I think it's really good.